أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على من بعث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Right, we're going to go through another ayah from the ayat of Ya Ayyuhannas, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls out to all of mankind. And we said previously in our session the day before yesterday, which was highlighting this very sentence structure, Ya Ayyuhannas, and we said that it is a more general statement than Ya Ayyuhalladhina amanu. Whilst Ya Ayyuhalladhina amanu is specifying the believers, Ya Ayyuhannas is specifying the believers and others as well, and the unbelievers as well. Now obviously this Quran was revealed to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam while he was in Mecca and while he was in Medina, and his main antagonists, his main opponents were the kuffar of Quraysh. So Ya Ayyuhannas, generally speaking, is encompassing the Quraysh, the kuffar of Quraysh. Tamam? So when we want to understand these verses a little bit better, we understand their hal and their circumstances and situation, and that brings about the understanding of the verse a little bit better as well. Tamam? And then we can apply it better to the people of our times, the nas, the people of our times. So the second verse that we're going to go through from the series, from the 20 verses, is still in Surah Al-Baqarah. We recited this in the second night, right? So the night before last night. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says in verse number 167, 168, Ya Ayyuhannas, kulu mimma fil ardi, halalan, طيبا ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين. O people, O mankind, everybody, listen up. Kulu, eat, consume, sustain yourselves with mimma fil ardi, everything that is taken from this earth, halalan طيبا, that is halal and is tayyib, that is lawful and it's also good to eat. وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ, and do not follow in the footsteps of shaitan. إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌ مُبِينٌ, for verily he is an enemy to you that has been cut off from all connections with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tamam? Or he is an enemy that is absolutely clear for everybody to see. One of the two. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding the kuffar of Quraysh, and by extension all of mankind, to eat and consume from what is halal. Tamam? And not just everything, right? Kulu mimma fil ard. So min here, littab'eed, meaning that it is some of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put on this earth, because not everything on this earth is there to consume. Tamam? And from those things that we can consume, there are lawful and there are unlawful, and we are commanded to eat from or consume from the lawful. Somebody could say now, Ya Shaykh, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to the kuffar here, they haven't even said La ilaha illallah yet. They haven't even believed in Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that he is a messenger from Allah yet. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them to do something from the furu' of the sharia. Right? From the secondary and tertiary elements of the sharia, which is to eat halal. First you say La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, then you eat halal. Right? You don't find any atheists going around like, I think I'll have some halal meat today. No one does that. The only people that do that are the people who have La ilaha illallah in their hearts, because their conviction is what leads them to seek the halal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded them with. Tamam? Whereas the disbeliever, he's not going to care. He's going to eat from non-halal, probably non-halal, because he's Islamophobic. In the 21st century, he doesn't like eating halal because it's associated with Muslims. Tamam? So why is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala now telling them, eat from the halal? Right? One of the reasons is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just going to speak to them about the primary element of what they're supposed to do. Right? He's going to speak to them about all of the things that they are supposed to do in life. And when he commands them, this command isn't a do it command, it's a why aren't you doing it? Are you dumb? Where are you taking your moral and ethical code from? Where are you taking your commands, the right and wrong, from? Who are you following in this life to tell you what is halal and what is haram? That is tawbih. It's called tawbih. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands, for example, sometimes His command isn't for al-amr. It's not for an obligation that we are now supposed to do. Right? So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, كُلُوا مِمَّا فِي الْأَرْضِ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا, He's not saying it as you must eat halal tayyib. He's saying it in a different way. He's saying it in a way of tawbih, of telling them off. Why aren't you doing this? Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in a couple of ayat later, Ya Ayyuhannas amanu kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum. That kulu there, that's a command. Eat and consume from the good that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for you. That's a command. Why? Because it is directed towards the believers. And the believers, they follow the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas the disbelievers, they're not going to follow the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They haven't even followed the first command, which is La ilaha illallah, right? Ubuduni wa la tushriku bi shay'a. Tamam. So if they haven't done the first command, then it doesn't make sense for them to follow the second command, or the third command, or even the 10th command, which is consuming halal food. So therefore, it is a tawbih. It is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling them off for not doing it in the first place, and from not have followed the first command that we took the other day, which was Ya Ayyuhannas u'budu rabbakum. Okay. Then he says, eat from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided you in this earth, halalan. Halal meaning that which is lawful. Halal, that which is lawful. That which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made lawful. And the only thing that is lawful for us in the Sharia is what comes from Allah and His Messenger to tell us that this is permissible to consume. Tamam? Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala follows that up with tayyiba. So we don't just eat the halal, we also eat the tayyib too. If someone was to just eat the halal, technically he hasn't done anything wrong, but he might not have done the right thing. Because not everything that is permissible in the Sharia, that is halal, is something that you should do. Tamam? Not everything that is permissible, not everything that is halal, is something that you should do. That's a strange example. What's going on? Do you want to, should we chat afterwards? Oh, yeah, billah. Tamam? Okay, that's a good example though. Talaq, for example. Yeah? The opposite is also true. Getting married. Halal, no? Wala haram? Astaghfirullah, Jamal. What do you say? Arba. Do you want to come on camera and say that? Arba. Tamam? So getting married, halal, without a shadow of a doubt, right? But it doesn't mean that you should do it. Somebody who hasn't got a job, right, can't provide for his wife, is not going to be able to look after his kids, doesn't have the maturity of mind to be able to understand when a woman says something, she means the opposite. I love my wife, yeah? I was just saying that. Tamam? If someone doesn't have that level of maturity, they're not ready to get married, so they shouldn't get married. Tamam? But is someone now going to say that getting married is haram? La, habibi, no, not at all. Tamam? So, just because something is halal doesn't mean that we should do it. So just because some foods are halal doesn't mean that we should consume it as well. Right? It has to be tayyib. Tayyib, what does tayyib mean? Tayyib mean that it's good. It's good food. It's healthy food. It's something that sustains you and is good for your body and is not harmful for you. Huh? Wholesome. Aywa, wholesome. Wholesome to who though? Wholesome to the normal average individual, someone who has no illnesses, no ailments, nor any freakish abilities either. You have some brothers, mashallah, they have the ability to eat like entire boxes of celebrations, right? Maltesers, Milky Ways, all going in. He eats the whole box himself, and nothing. It's like nothing's happened to him. Wallah, I eat like 10 chocolates, man. I'm getting like a sugar rush. I'm like lying down. I'm like, yo, I need to balance this out with a bit of water. But some people are built different. Some people they can consume. Haribo, wallah, I can't eat like more than a couple of them before like my blood starts to boil. But some people, mashallah, Imam Osama as well, yeah. Sometimes at the end of Taraweeh, in the last 10 nights especially, like when he stays over for itikaf, and people like to bring sweets and stuff, he'll be downstairs in the basement and he's talking, and all the shabab are playing and they're all talking to each other and stuff, and he's talking to everyone else, and there's Haribo in front of him, and he's just wallah shaykh, and he's just eating. And before you know it, it's all gone. It's like, Sheikh, do you not realize how much you've eaten? He's like, wallah, no. So some people are built different, right? So that doesn't necessarily make it tayyib though, yeah? Like no one on the face of this earth is going to say, and I'm going to look at Haribo and say, yeah, it's tayyib. This is good, wholesome food. No, it's very unhealthy for you. Tamam? So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is commanding everybody to eat halal, and from the halal, eat the tayyib as well. Tamam? That which is good for you and that which is wholesome for you is going to sustain you, and so on and so forth. And then he says, وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. Allah, then don't follow in the footsteps of shaitan. It's almost as if this command to eat from the halal to the kuffar is a tamheed, is an introduction for this part here. I know you don't eat from the halal, and I know you eat from the haram and you consume from the haram, and I know that you share the haram as well to everybody too. So don't follow the footsteps of shaitan. Allah, this is an amr min bab al-awwal. This is the command that they have to now follow. This is no longer Allah telling them off. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling them to do something, which is don't follow the footsteps of shaitan. Tamam? Right, then he says, لا تتبعوا اتباع. Follow. خطوات comes from the word خطوة or خطوة, one of the two. Either because the jumhur of the Qurra, the reciters of the Quran, they recite this verse, وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطْوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ, with a sukoon on the ta. And Hafs, which is what Imam Osama recites, Ibn Kathir, and a handful of other reciters, the minority, they recite it خُطُوَات, with a dhamma on the ta. What's the difference between the two? The one with a sukoon, خُطْوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ, is taken from the word khatwa. Yeah? Khatwa, which means one step. So don't even follow one step from the steps of shaitan. And the one with the dhamma, khutuwat, is taken from the word khutwa, right? Which means the footsteps or the masafa ma bayn al-qadamain. So whenever you take a step, the distance between one foot and the other, that's called the khutwa. Yeah? So khutuwat is taken from the distance between those two. Which means that there's multiple steps. Don't follow the path of shaitan. And the other one is don't even follow one step from the steps of shaitan that leads you to. Now, khutuwat are not necessarily the footsteps themselves of shaitan, but rather the path that he has trodden. Right? And this is a metaphor that we use for taking someone as an example to follow. Tamam? When we even say it in the English language, we say, Fulan is following in the footsteps of his father. Meaning that he is taking his father as an example in his life to follow. Tamam? So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان, he's telling us, and telling the kuffar, don't take the footsteps of shaitan, don't take shaitan as your moral compass, as someone to follow. Don't take him as an example, or anybody that follows him as an example. It's almost as if you're walking in the desert, and you see footsteps in the sand, and you're lost. And you think that these footsteps that are in the sand are going to take you to a path that is going to be a path of salvation, just because somebody else has trodden those footsteps. So you trod those footsteps nonetheless. Not knowing what the outcome is going to be at the end. Not knowing where those footsteps are leading. Those are the khutuwat of shaitan. Tamam? Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He set the path out, the sabil of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He set that path out clear, and the destination is also clear. Tamam? وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it as footsteps. Right? Not the destination. Right? Don't follow the destination of shaitan. Don't become like the shaitan. No. Don't follow the footsteps of shaitan. Why? Because shaitan, the enemy that he is someone who wants to lead you step by step to that destination. His ultimate goal is what? Is Jahannam. That's his ultimate abode, right? But his ultimate goal for all of the believers is what? Destruction, misguide. I'm looking for something more specific. Disbelieve. No more iman. No iman. That's his goal. To take away your iman. Now for a firm Muslim, that's going to be pretty difficult to do. No one's going to come to you, Jamal, and say, listen, I don't think Islam is true because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're going to be like, hey, be quiet, however you say it in Pashto, right? Huh? Chapsha. You're going to say it, Chapsha. How do you say in Kandahar? Okay.
Because he said khutu and khutu was in two different ways.
Oh, yeah, look at that, subhanallah. Lughat in Afghanistan, huh? Okay, so if someone says that to you, you're going to be like, listen, be quiet, man. I know the truth. I know the haqq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I've read the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it to me, my Rabb, my Parvardigar, my Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He tells me all of these things. Who are you to tell me otherwise? Nope. Right? So what does shaitan do? Instead of doing that, he takes you on a path. He says, come do this.
You're a good Muslim.
And now do that. Ah, yeah, you're amazing, mashallah. Yeah, don't worry, man. Like, save your spot in the front row, even though Imam tells you not to. It's all good, it's all good. Right? But he tells you to do things, tells you to do things, tells you to do things, until before you know it, you've fallen into a sea of shahawat. And then because of the shahawat that you've fallen into, you are now open to the shubuhat. What's the difference between the two? Shahawat are all of those things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want you to do. The muharramat. Right? You fall into them because they are mustaladhat. They feel good to do. Tamam? A lot of our shabab, they end up watching things that they're not supposed to watch. They know it's haram as well. Right? They know they're not supposed to do that. But they do it. Why? Because it feels good. That's the first step. Shahwa. Right? Making sure that he takes advantage of that weakness in the human character. Then from that door of shahwa that opens, shubha now. Yeah? Doubts in what? Doubts in the validity and the veracity of these ahkam. Am I really doing something haram? I'm only looking at something, and the thing that I'm looking at is on a screen. So it's not actually real, and it doesn't actually exist. It's just a recording of something that, you know what I'm saying? I'm just seeing here, and if I just turn this off or press this button, then it disappears. So technically, am I looking at something? I'm looking at the mirror image of something. And is looking at the mirror image of something the same as looking at something itself? And then you do all of these acrobats, and before you know it, looking at the haram things is halal. So then the door of the shubuhat are now open. And now when the doors of the shubuhat open, it's a slippery slope down to doubting the very deen itself. Khalas. So these are the khutuwat of shaitan. He takes you down a road, takes you down a path, and you end up following one step after another step after another step until you get to that destination of ukfur. فَلَمَّا كَفَرَ قَالَ إِنِّي بَرِيءٌ مِّنْكَ إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهَ رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. استغفر الله وتوب إليه. تمام؟ ولا تتبعوا خطوات الشيطان. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌ مُبِينٌ. He emphasizes, he says, إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌ مُبِينٌ. Verily, he is an enemy to you. Now, whenever the word inna is used in the Arabic language, ya ahbab, it's used whenever someone that you're speaking to is doubtful. I say to you, for example, Jamal, we just prayed Asr. Right? I say, in Arabic, I'll say, صلينا العصر. Yeah? نحن صلينا العصر. We have prayed Asr. You come and you're doubting whether I'm telling the truth or we've actually prayed Asr. So I say, Ya Jamal, إننا صلينا العصر. Verily we have prayed Asr. We have 100%, there's no doubt about it, prayed Asr. Why? Because you doubt. Tamam? So here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to who? The non-Muslims and the Muslims. The Muslims, they know 100% the devil, right? Iblis, shaitan, clear enemy, open enemy, no doubt about it. The kuffar as well, even of Quraysh, knew that the shaitan was their enemy. Did you know that on Hajj, when the Hajj season would come in, they would go to the Jamarat and they would throw stones just as Ibrahim alayhi salam had thrown stones, and they would say that they are throwing stones to shaitan. So they would recognize shaitan as being the enemy, but they won't realize that they're following in his footsteps. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala emphasizes, not because they are doubtful that he is the enemy, but because they have not realized that they have followed in his footsteps. So he emphasizes, إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌ مُبِينٌ. Verily, he is for you an enemy. Adu, adawa, the one who shows you adawa, animosity and enmity. The adu is the one who wants to see you fail even if he doesn't succeed. Shaitan, where is his ultimate abode? Jahannam, right? Right? لَأَمْلَأَنَّ جَهَنَّمَ منك وممن اتبعك أو وممن تبعك أجمعين. تمام? I'm going to fill you and everybody that follows in your footsteps in Jahannam. So he knows, he's been told. He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and bartered with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to let me continue. Right? فَأَنظِرْنِي إِلَى يَوْمِ يُبْعَثُونَ. Let me live on until the day of resurrection, until the day you inherit the earth. And so even despite this bartering and this agreement with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah told him that at that moment that you are going to Jahannam, if this is the case, and this is our deal, your abode will be Jahannam. So he says, okay, fine. لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. I am going to misguide all of them. إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. Tamam? So even though shaitan knows his destination, he knows where he's going, he still wants to see you fail. Even though he's not going to succeed, he still just wants to see you fail. Tamam? So the true enemy is the one who doesn't care about his own circumstances as long as you fail. Meaning that they will do whatever it takes in order to see you fall. Tamam? Never trust this person, ever. Tamam. That's the adu. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says mubin. Mubin can be from one of two words. Either it is from the word abana. Either mubin is from the word abana. I think I'll do it from the outside. Either mubin is from the word abana, which means to make clear, or mubin is from the word bana, which means al-inqita', to sever, to cut, to no longer be connected, to be disconnected. Tamam? So, he is either an enemy that is disconnected and severed, or he is an enemy that is clear. Tamam? Which one is better? Clear? Sulaiman is going with clear. Sulaiman is going with none of them. Both of them. Which one is better? For us to say here in this particular ayah that shaitan is an enemy that is cut off or an enemy that is clear. Allah, Jameel. Okay, so we got cut off and we got clear. All right. Why did you just justify your reasoning? Clear enemy, right? Okay, tamam. And then cut off? Why? Ah. Oh, Allahu Akbar. Pakistani's on point, man. Subhanallah. Subhanallah. Right? So he's cut off. Cut off from what? Cut off from the fact that you can't see him. He is a clear enemy in the sense that you recognize him as an enemy. But can you see him? Can you see what he's doing? Do you know what he's up to even right now? Do you know what his cronies are up to and what they're doing? No, you can't. You can sense him just as much as you can sense gravity. Right? Like you can't see him. You can't sense him. Do you know what I'm saying? Khalas. So that's shaitan. So in that respect, he's not clear, rather he is cut off. Cut off from you, cut off from your senses, cut off from your ability to see what he's doing. Tamam? So he is an adu mubin. So watch out for him. That's why you have to be even more wary of him, and that is why you have fallen into following his footsteps. Because you didn't know, and you didn't see. Had you been able to see, maybe you would have abstained and not followed his footsteps. But because you couldn't, and because he was hidden from you, then you end up following his footsteps. Tamam? إِنَّهُ لَكُمْ عَدُوٌ مُبِينٌ. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes on to say, إِنَّمَا يَأْمُرُكُمْ بِالسُّوءِ وَالْفَحْشَاءِ وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. He goes on to describe some of the things that shaitan does. Right? Some of his characteristics and qualities and the hal. Right? The circumstances of shaitan. He says, إِنَّمَا يَأْمُرُكُمْ. Verily he commands you. Right? بِالسُّوءِ وَالْفَحْشَاءِ. With evil and fahsha. Fahsha is like lewdness, like absolute reprehensible evil. Reprehensible, like if it's done and people see it, everybody does inkar. Everybody like pushes back. Everybody says this is a terrible thing. Even the non-Muslims. Like it's universal, like universal morality. Tamam? Goes against it. Or it could be a su is evil and fahsha is a more serious type of evil, meaning minor sins and major sins. وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And to say about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that which you don't know. This is one of the biggest sins that anybody can do, to speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in ignorance. And you have today, mashallah, a lot of the shabab, they speak about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if they're speaking about their friend, as if they're speaking about their mate on the street. They debate and argue about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if like they've met him and sat with him and that he's one of their acquaintances. Absolute istighfaf billahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. Adam al-tawqir, no respect, no reverence, no even like taqwa with regards to the magnificence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All that, and they're arguing about secondary, tertiary points that have no real sort of influence or change in our lives. Tamam? Okay, let's unpack this ayah. إِنَّمَا يَأْمُرُكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَأْمُرُكُمْ. Verily the shaitan, He commands you. What does he command you with? With su' and fahsha. Anytime you hear the word innama in the Quran, it means that whatever is going to come after it, nothing else other than that matters. Exclude everything else except for what I'm about to mention to you. Innama ya'murukum bis-su'i wal-fahsha. Tamam? So, verily he commands you. What does he command you with? Su' and fahsha. Minor sins and major sins. Tamam? وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And this is what we were speaking about before. He commands you with major sins and minor sins, meaning that you fall into the shahawat. And then وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ, then you fall into the shubuhat. So you say about Allah that which you don't know. Meaning that you say that, like you can do whatever you want in this world because Allah is Ghafur Rahim. La. Man qal. Who said that to you? Right? It's like, no. Like, Allah is not going to hold you to account for these small things. He's only going to hold you to account for major things. He's not going to punish these disbelievers for disbelieving because they're actually really good people and they're giving sadaqah and stuff like that. La. Man qala lak. Who told you all of this stuff? وَأَن تَقُولُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. And the door to that is the shubuhat and the shahwat. Tamam? Now these ayat, they come in the circumstances and the scenarios of Surah Al-Baqarah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing the circumstances and the situations of the disbelievers. And he starts going back to verse number 161 where he says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَمَاتُوا وَهُمْ كُفَّارٌ أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَيْهِمْ لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ وَالْمَلَائِكَةِ وَالنَّاسِ أَجْمَعِينَ. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh. Those who disbelieve, those who have turned away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's ayat openly and blatantly and with the absolute utmost egotism, and they die upon that state, أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَيْهِمْ لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ. For them is the curse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And not just the curse of Allah, the malaika. And not just the malaika, النَّاسِ أَجْمَعِينَ. Tamam? خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا, and they're going to be in that state forever. And then he goes on to turn to the kuffar and say, وَإِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ. Even though this is your circumstance, your Lord is one Lord, so worship Him. لا إله إلا هو الرحمن الرحيم, the most compassionate and the most merciful. And then he goes on to speak about like the ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of His creation. إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ وَالْفُلْكِ الَّتِي تَجْرِي فِي الْبَحْرِ بِمَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسِ وَمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ مِنَ السَّمَاءِ مِن مَاءٍ فَأَحْيَا بِهِ الْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا وَبَثَّ فِيهَا مِن كُلِّ دَابَةٍ وَتَصْرِيفِ الرِّيَاحِ وَالسَّحَابِ الْمُسَخَّرِ بَيْنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ. Listing out all of these different ayat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for you to see clearly that there is no God worthy of worship but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet still, after seeing all of these things, you disbelieve. How dumb are you? And then he goes on to describe, even after those ayat, what their circumstances are. وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَتَّخِذُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ أَنْدَادًا يُحِبُّونَهُمْ كَحُبِّ اللَّهِ. That from the people are those who take partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They love them more than they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. But those who believe, they are more severe in their love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala over anything else. Recognizing that yes, believers still love other than Allah. They still love their parents, they still love their families, they still love their friends, they still love their countries and the places that they've grown up in. They still love certain elements of the dunya. They love their wives, right, and their children. Right? All of this stuff is all good, but the severity of love is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. The love that they have for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surpasses their love for their families and for everything else. The love that they have for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam because he is muballigh anillah, because he comes with the message from Allah, is more severe than anybody else from their families and from their friends and from anything else. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى أكون أحب إليه من Allah min malihi wa waladihi wa nasi ajma'in. Yeah? And another narration, min walidihi wa waladihi wa nasi ajma'in. Al-ana ya Umar. Al-ana ya Umar. Tamam? Okay. And then he goes on to say, إِذْ تَبَرَّأَ الَّذِينَ تُبِعُوا مِنَ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوا وَرَأَوُا الْعَذَابَ وَتَقَطَّعَتْ بِهِمُ الْأَسْبَابِ. Then those who followed, before he's even talked about the وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ, he's talking about those who just follow those who came before them. Tamam? إِذْ تَبَرَّأَ الَّذِينَ اتُّبِعُوا مِنَ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوا. Those who are followed, they free themselves and disassociate themselves from those who followed them. Right? وَرَأَوُا الْعَذَابَ وَتَقَطَّعَتْ بِهِمُ الْأَسْبَابِ. And they all saw the punishment there and then happening in front of them. And any way out that they thought they were able to acquire disappeared. It's like, all the paths are there, all the doors are there to escape, all of them close one by one, and the paths disappear like like the wind is blowing the sand away. All of the paths have now disappeared. They have no idea where to go and what to do. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ اتَّبَعُوا, and then those who followed, those who led them astray, they will say, لَوْ أَنَّ لَنَا كَرَّةً فَنَتَبَرَّأَ مِنْهُمْ كَمَا تَبَرَّأُوا مِنَّا. If only we were allowed to go back now and disassociate ourselves from them like they disassociated themselves from us. كَذَلِكَ يُرِيهِمُ اللَّهُ أَعْمَالَهُمْ حَسَرَاتٍ عَلَيْهِمْ. That is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows them the error of their ways, and so that they are in extreme regret. حَسَرَاتٍ عَلَيْهِمْ. Not just hasra. Not just hasra. حَسْرَةً. لا. حَسَرَاتٍ عَلَيْهِمْ. That they are in regret upon regret upon regret. وَمَا هُمْ بِخَارِجِينَ مِنَ النَّارِ. And they're never ever going to escape the clutches of Jahannam. Under those pretenses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, Ya Ayyuhannas, كُلُوا مِمَّا فِي الْأَرْضِ حَلَالًا طَيِّبًا وَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ. You see the bayan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how it comes in? Subhanallah. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in a few verses later, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum washkuru lillahi in kuntum iyyahu ta'budun. The same verse, the same subject matter, which is to eat and consume that which is lawful for you. The way in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discusses it when He's talking with the kuffar and the believers, and the difference with that, the way He talks about it to the believers exclusively, heaven and earth. He says, O you who believe, eat from the tayyibat, from those beautiful things, from those pure things. Halal and tayyibat. There's no halal here, because it is already expected that the Muslims are going to eat from halal. So kulu min tayyibati ma razaqnakum. What we have provided for you. There was no provision in the first verse, but here these are provisions for the believers. Tamam? Washkuru lillah, and be thankful and grateful for what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has provided for you. Before there was no gratitude, was there? It was all following the shaitan, and now he's going to lead you to Jahannam. In kuntum iyyahu ta'budun, if it is truly Him that you worship. If you truly worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then do these things. You see the difference in the khitab between the Ya Ayyuhannas and the Ya Ayyuhalladhina amanu? Tamam. Let's go on, let's try and catch up on ourselves, yeah? We're going to now precede Imam Usama in his recitation tonight, and we're going to jump on to the next verse with Ya Ayyuhalladhina amanu, which is in the beginning of Surah An-Nisa. Right, so there's nothing mentioned in Surah Al-Imran of Ya Ayyuhannas. Generally speaking, when you see Ya Ayyuhannas mentioned in any particular surah, that surah is most likely going to be Makki. Tamam? Because the kuffar of Quraysh are spoken to within that khitab, within that speech. And if that's the case, then Ya Ayyuhalladhina amanu, whenever you find that in a surah, it's most likely going to be Madani. Tamam. But it's not always the case, huh? Because Baqarah is Madani, and you have Ya Ayyuhannas. An-Nisa is Madani. In fact, it was one of the later surahs in the Quran. Tamam? There's even verses that were revealed after the conquest of Mecca. Tamam?
But after Hijrah, it makes it.
Huh?
After the Hijrah, the scholar says it's Madani Makki.
Yeah. Well, there's two ways of looking at it. Tamam? So regardless of that, Nisa, Surah An-Nisa is a Madani surah, but its opening is Ya Ayyuhannas. Tamam? So just because it's Ya Ayyuhannas doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be Makki. Sometimes it can be Madani as well. Tamam? Or it can be like it's Madani in Ya Ayyuhannas, but it's the only reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using Ya Ayyuhannas is because He's specifically wanting to address the kuffar of Quraysh whilst the Prophet ﷺ is in Medina. So He wants to talk to them. He wants to communicate with them, and He wants to send them a message, even though the Prophet ﷺ is in Medina and he's no longer in Mecca. Tamam? وَأَنذِرْ عَشِيرَتَكَ الْأَقْرَبِينَ. That's Makki through and through.
Yeah, but no, because since you're saying his khatab would be for his qawm, Quraysh.
Oh, yes. Okay. So, the matla of Surah An-Nisa is Ya Ayyuhannas. Tamam? Now, Surah An-Nisa, before we go into the verse, right? Surah An-Nisa, it talks about many different things. One of the most common things that it talks about throughout the entirety of the surah is familial relations, right? And monetary relations, laws of inheritance, and the laws of women. That's why it's called Surah An-Nisa. Tamam?
Difficult surah.
Is it a difficult surah?
Yes.
Why? Because you're a misogynist.
You also change.
Wallahi, you know when we were studying Arabic, right? The ضمير المؤنثة في المخاطبة was the is the hardest to do. It's the hardest to do, man. Because like everything is like أجلس تجلس يجلسون تجلسون, but for the women it's تجلسين. And usually, generally speaking, the طلبة العلم, because mashallah the atqiya and the awliya and the mashallah God-fearing men, they never usually mix with women, right? So when are they ever going to use أنتِ تكتبين or أنتِ تجلسين وأنتِ تعالين? Like, they're not going to use that ever, right? So whenever they try to memorize and learn, it's all حيصة بيس. They can use it after they get married, yeah. But subhanAllah, what's funny is, right, some of the brothers, because they're not used to it, right, so when they do get married, they end up speaking to their wives as if they're speaking to a man. أنت تعالى هنا واجلس. It's like, yo, am I a guy? What are you doing? Astaghfirullah. Okay, tamam. So it talks about all of these different ahkam, right? And it talks about it in like sort of engraved detail. So for example, the first part of the Quran, or the first part of Surah An-Nisa, is talking about marriage, right? And it talks about getting married to women whose husbands have passed away. And then it talks about ta'addud in zawaj as well, like multiple marriages. In fact, one of the first ayat, the third ayah is وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تُقْسِطُوا فِي الْيَتَامَى فَانْكِحُوا مَا طَابَ لَكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ مَثْنَى وَثُلَاثَ وَرُبَاعَ. Come on, you guys all memorize this, man. You guys should be reciting it with me. Tamam? So you marry from the women folk 2, 3, 4. فَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ أَلَّا تَعْدِلُوا فَوَاحِدَةً أَوْ. But if you fear that you're not going to be able to be just, then just one. So Allah starts with 2, 3, and 4, and then He ends with 1, meaning the original should be ta'addud, and if you can't, then you do 1. But the original for us is 1, and if you can, then do more. This is all anecdotal, and we try to add a sort of a humorous air to it, just so that we don't harm anybody's feelings. Okay, and then he goes on to talk about the laws of inheritance as well, and then like if people end up getting involved in a haram relationship, like what is the circumstance there, right? وَلَا مُتَّخِذَاتِ أَخْدَانٍ. Right, they don't have boyfriends and girlfriends and so on and so forth. The believers don't have that. And what's the punishment if they are caught with that, and so on and so forth. And then if there is problems between husband and wife and marital relations. So a lot of this surah, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا فَبَعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا. Right? So if there's going to be a problem in the relationship, then send someone that is going to represent the girl and send someone who's going to represent the boy. So maybe that they can try and reconcile between each other. And if they can't reconcile between each other, then they split with goodness and so on and so forth. And then there's other verses as well in between all of that. Then it ends with like sort of ahkam about inheritance as well, and about women as well, and so on and so forth. Tamam? And in there's stuff about the munafiqun and about jihad fi sabilillah, all mixed up in between. Tamam? So that's the context matter, or that's the content of the surah itself. Huh? خلاص للسائل والمحروم. أنت السائل وأنا المحروم. MashaAllah. Is that a piece of meat or what is it, man? This is like a majdood on steroids. Allahumma barik. Okay, so that's the context of the surah. How much time we got? Alright, let's do this quickly. So he says, Ya Ayyuhannas, O my people, ittaqu rabbakum. Be mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be fearful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, worry about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His hudud and His iqab. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala set down laws, rules and regulations about familial relations, about inheritance, about all these different things. So make sure that you have taqwa so that you abide by these rules. Those who don't abide by these rules, they have no taqwa in them. Tamam? So, ittaqu rabbakum. And what's going to help you to have taqwa is recognize that الَّذِي خَلَقَكُمْ, that He is the one who created you. From what? مِن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. Allah. Taqwa, having taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is recognizing His wahdaniyah, recognizing His absolute power over us and His absolute ability over us. So He is the only one worthy of worship, and He is the only one worthy to be followed with regards to what is right and what is wrong. Tamam? And therefore, recognizing that tawheed, what assists us in recognizing that tawheed is recognizing that we are all coming from one place. So there's no reason for us to compete with one another over hierarchy and who is in charge over the other. Because كُلُّكُم مِّن آدَمَ وَآدَمُ مِّن turab. All of you guys go back to Adam, and Adam is from the dust, meaning that all of you guys come from one place, tawheed, one origin. And that one origin was created by what? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. تمام? الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها. Allah. Bara'atul istihlal. Whenever you have like a poem, or whenever you have a book, the ulama, they have this thing where they want to mention within the introduction of that book something about what the book is going to be about. Tamam? And this is called bara'at al-istihlal. This means that the author, the one who is authoring this book, he is showing his prowess in his intellectual and academic ability by being able to bring an introduction that talks about whatever the subject matter of the book is without actually mentioning that subject matter explicitly. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He does in Surah An-Nisa. The entirety of the surah is all about familial relations and about all these other things, as well as tawheed and nifaq and shirk. Because in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about how nothing is unforgivable. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive everything except for shirk. Right? He mentions this in this verse. Right? So all of it is about tawheed and so on and so forth, and familial relations and stuff like that. So He's mentioning all of these things in the beginning of this surah for bara'at al-istihlal, to make everybody ready for what's going to come. Tamam? So all of our ulama, they follow the same sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His kitab. خلقكم من نفس واحدة. Who is the nafs wahid? Adam. Tamam. وخلق منها زوجها. Who is the zawj? Hawa. Yeah? And how did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create Hawa? ضل الأعوج. ضل الأعوج. Tamam? And the Prophet ﷺ described it as a bent rib.
What do you call it?
ضلع الأعوج. ضلع. تمام? So the crooked rib. What does this crooked rib mean? Crooked. Yeah. What does it mean? It's a metaphor for something. It's not straight. Yeah. You guys are being so PC right now. Come, bring out the misogyny. It's bent a little bit. Imperfection. Well, you're perfect, are you? Fragile. Oh, okay. Be gentle. No, not kamzor. It's not deficient. It's not like any of these like other meanings. What the dil al-a'waj means, what the bent rib means, it means that look at how we've all of us unanimously look at something that is bent, meaning that's something that needs to be straightened. Because that comes from an instinct in mankind that we feel that we need to be in control of the things that we are not possession of, but we are carers over, that we have responsibility over. We feel that we need to have some form of control over it, right? The person who is managing a company, it's his responsibility that the company functions properly. He's going to feel like he needs to have or enact his control over that company in order for it to function properly. When a person, he is responsible over his family, he feels like he needs to enact his control over his family in order for it to function properly. When a person manages a masjid, the trustees, sometimes they need to feel that they need to enact their control over the masjid in order for it to function properly. This is a natural predisposition of the human being. We are all like this, all of us. Don't touch my stuff, because it's mine. Right? I control it. I decide what happens to it. You don't touch my phone. If you touch my phone, you can only touch it with my permission. Why? Because I'm in control of it, because it belongs to me. Natural. That's our natural predisposition. Tamam? So whenever we get into a relationship with people, we feel the need to want to control them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that, and the Prophet is telling us that our wives, they are from the bent rib, meaning that our predisposition and our natural instinct is to straighten. We're not supposed to straighten it, because if we do, we're going to break it. We're going to break that relationship. We're going to break that bond of love and harmony and affection. وَبَثَّ مِنْهُمَا رِجَالًا كَثِيرًا وَنِسَاءً. Who are those رِجَال كَثِير وَنِسَاء? Who are they? Us. Me and you. We are the men and women that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent forth in this earth from Adam alayhi salam and Hawa. Tamam? وَبَثَّ. Batha meaning like to spread out. Bath from buthuth. Bath is when you get seeds and you're planting those seeds. You're not like precise. You're like, you put the seed in here and then one here and then another here and then another here. You're just chucking it out. That's bath. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spread you all out everywhere, all across the world. Right? وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, taqwa again. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you ask of Him. You ask of Him what? Everything. You ask of Him mercy. You ask of Him compassion. You ask of Him everything that you need in this world. Everything that you ask of, you ask of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِذَا سَأَلْتَ فَاسْأَلِ اللَّهِ وَإِذَا اسْتَعَنْتَ فَاسْتَعِنْ بِاللَّهِ إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. We seek assistance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. Tamam? So fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be wary of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you ask of. You ask of Him. Not just that, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us children. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us pious and righteous spouses. Right? We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a happy and conducive life. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the rizq in the world, which this surah talks about abundantly. He talks about all of these things. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about all of these things that I'm mentioning now in this surah. And He talks about it extensively. Tamam? So fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one that you ask of all of these things that He's going to mention in this surah. Wal arham. Right? Wattaqu al arham. Not if which one? One of the ulama, as-Sakaki or az-Zajjaj, one of the linguists, they said that وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامِ. If you were to say وَالْأَرْحَامِ, because the ayah goes وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ الَّذِي تَسَاءَلُونَ بِهِ وَالْأَرْحَامَ. Right? If you were to say arhami, that means you are following on from asking Allah. Meaning, fear Allah, the one that you ask of, and also your families that you ask of. So you associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But if it's mansoob, then it's fear Allah and also fear the rights of your arham. Tamam? So be dutiful to your families and so on and so forth.
That's grammar lesson.
Grammar lesson. Inna Allah kana alaykum raqiba. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly ever overaware and watchful over you. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is spelling out for all of mankind the rights and responsibilities that they have over their own selves and the rights and responsibilities that they have over their own families. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is calling out to the Muslims and the non-Muslims. Be dutiful to your families. Be dutiful to those things that connect you with one another. Be dutiful to the blood connections that you have with one another. This is one of the most important things in life and one of the most important things to preserve in a world where that is being torn apart generation by generation. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us and allow us to recognize all of the ahkam and all of the ayat and all of the beautiful meanings that we have gone through in these two verses. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا رب العالمين. اللهم وفقنا يا كريم لكل عمل تحب وترضى. اللهم علمنا التأويل وفقهنا في الدين يا رب العالمين. اللهم يسر أمورنا كلها يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم انصر إخواننا المستضعفين في فلسطين وفي السودان وفي لبنان وفي سوريا وفي كل مكان يا رب العالمين. اللهم كن لهم ولا تكن عليهم يا رب العالمين. وتقبل منا صيامنا وصلاتنا وقيامنا يا رب العالمين. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله